A very good evening and a warm welcome to the NatHealth Leadership Outreach Series. This is a series of interactions NatHealth is organizing with our top leaders in the healthcare sector. And in these sessions, every week, every day, we take up some key questions from our frontline health workers. This pandemic has had immense impact over our entire workforce who are serving customers for a protracted period of time. For the last 15 to 16 months, day in, day out, round the clock, 24/7 by 365, our frontline Corona heroes have been serving both the COVID patients and at the same time taking the burden of the non-COVID patients and making sure that the health infrastructure, our productivity levels match up to the immense needs. During this period, there are a number of consequences, including infections that the frontline health workers had to deal with. They had to deal with immense fatigue, burnout, stress, real worries about their families, their own well-beings, as well as ensuring that the right optimum and quality treatment is available to the patients who are seeking out care. To hear all about it today, we are very privileged to have Dr. Om Manchanda with us. It's my privilege to give a short, brief introduction of Dr. Om Manchanda, who is the Managing Director, Dr. Lal PathLabs Limited. Om Manchanda is the Managing Director, and he has successfully led the transformation of Dr. Lal PathLabs in the last nearly 16 years from a small business to a professionally run India's largest medical diagnostic company. He also successfully led the IPO of the company in the year 2015, the first company to be listed in diagnostic space in India. Dr. Manchanda's career spans over 3 decades across diverse industries like FMCG, agri-inputs, and consumer healthcare. He spent nearly a decade with Hindustan Unilever, where he started his career as a management trainee in the year 1990. He has done MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and is also an alumnus of Harvard Business School. He is graduate in veterinary sciences. Dr. Manchanda was the finalist for the prestigious UI Entrepreneur of the Year Awards for 2015 and later won this award for 2019 in Healthcare and Life Sciences category. Recently received a Healthcare Personality of the Year 2020 award in the FICCI Healthcare Excellence Awards, organized in September 2020. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Om Manchanda, to this particular session. Thank you so much for being here. I would like to... Thank you, Om. I would like to open up the question, Om, broadly in, through the interactions we have been having in these sessions with frontline health workers. The 3 broad issues that come up to the forefront is, one is this entire issue of high stress levels, fatigue, nearing burnout, and over a very protracted period of time. It's not for 1 week or a few days, not for a month or a few weeks. It's just over 15 days, 15 months. The second side really is the worry around the safety, not only for the individual, for the frontline health worker, but their colleagues, the entire community, their family at home, and of course the constant worry that you don't know. This is a pandemic that has many uncertainties. And we are learning every week, every month as we go along this curve. So what lies ahead, that uncertainty, whether you are going to be able to provide the optimum care to the patients who reach out to you, the responsibility that comes along with it. As one of India's prominent healthcare players, how do you relate to those issues? And as Dr. Lal PathLabs, your organizations, what are some of the things, Om, that you have done about it? Over to you, Om. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth, and good evening to all the viewers. It's my privilege to be on this platform and share my experiences. I know it's been an extremely difficult time for society in general and for people more who are engaged in healthcare. And I've seen this experience so closely that especially the providers, hospitals, and diagnostics are flooded with a lot of queries, patient interface. So it's been quite challenging for all of us in general. So what I thought I'll share with you is that what are the few things that I have have personally gone through, I have experienced this, and my message is to all of you who are fighting this out in the field. So I put together a small module on a PowerPoint presentation, a small video, if I can play during this talk. Then maybe later part of my talk, I'll share with you my personal experiences in the company, uh, which actually may be useful for some of you who are listening to my talk. So let me start with first the key message that I want to give to all the healthcare workers. Uh, can I share the presentation now?
Yes, you to share the screen. Yeah, thanks.
Is it visible?
This coming up is good to go. You're good to go. Thanks.
Right. So here it starts. The first is there is no doubt that COVID-19 outbreak has really created very, very difficult times for all of us and for our industry. And if I were to title this that we are all one industry and there's one challenge, but surprisingly, all of us have had different experiences in the industry. So there are different organizations that we have today, diagnostics, nursing homes, hospitals, IVD companies, pharmaceuticals, and now vaccine manufacturers also joining this entire list. And list just goes on. There are a lot of other stuffs like PPE manufacturers, etc. But all these organizations have different kinds of experiences because some of them are B2C, some of them are B2B. But the ones which are B2C, where we directly meet the patients, their experiences have been very different. And if I go down further and look at the employees in these organizations, they also have had different experiences. So let me start with first who are sitting at the senior level, the CXOs as we call them. All of us had to deal with the government, industry bodies, media, investors, general society, interface, internal staff motivation, business decisions. So there are a lot of things people at the top management level had to deal with. The middle management, which is much more difficult situation because they have to really be on it all the time. That's related to operations, staff motivations, etc. And the life is even more tougher for front end workers, doctors, where they have to deal directly with the patient, patient family members, and interface with middle and senior management and so on. But there has been a one common thread to all of us that there is absolutely no lockdown for any one of us. We have been working 24/7, fighting with this enemy, which is Corona. And we are also caught up between lots of family challenges and the demands of the job. And it's not been just for 1 or 2 days, it's been now nearly more than a year and a half. And it's been full of stress, anxiety, frustrations, mood swings, and I think we've experienced virtually every bit of it. And I also felt that while we were going through wave one, we thought it's very tough. But when wave two came in, we thought wave one was very simple and manageable. But wave two actually has been extremely brutal for all of us. And if I look back, it's created some kind of fatigue in all of us, saying that it's been so long. And the question which is lingering on our mind is, when will this all end? And it's been too much. But it's also been some kind of blessings that has brought in depressing lows. But there are cases of where we have had joyously manic highs as well. And I've been reading a lot of articles which have been written by especially doctors in ICU rooms. They have shared their experiences. I'll try and share some of that stuff to convey a few messages. There's an article which recently appeared, and I went through that. I have put down a few lines here for you, and if you want to see that, there's a link available here. These are emotions shared by one of the doctors in ICU. And she says that it's been both an especially deeply onerous duty and yet at the same time, an extraordinarily traumatizing responsibility. So there are two experiences she shares. One is to be the very last person caring for someone who has absolutely no one else familiar at their bedside a few moments before they relinquish life forever. makes that precious ebbing time with them so much more momentous, so much more fateful, so much more scared or sacred. Equally meaningful is participating in the gloriously happy moment when someone seriously sick finally turns the corner, gets off the ventilator, and eventually goes home. So you are actually seeing both kind of emotions where you see someone go and where you see someone survive as well. This particular outbreak has provided us moments to experience a sense of purpose. And this is something which I have also personally been through, where we all run organizations. There is an objective behind this. At times there's a commercial objective. But for last 1.5 years, I'm seeing something very different in all of us, that we all exist to serve a purpose which is much above all commercial areas that we are all used to. It's also pushing us to be very empathic towards society, the kind of pains and depressing situations that we see. And I think above all is making a difference in someone's life. It's a very unique experience, and also a sort of a moment for all of us where we can give it back to the society. I came across a very interesting video that I want to share with you, which is of a firefighter. And I was thinking of what are the other professions where you risk your own life to save somebody else's life. And firefighters' life is somewhat very similar as what we are all going through. So give me a moment to load this video and let's all see it together and look at what are the messages that we get from here.
Back in New York, I am the head of development for a nonprofit called Robin Hood.
Is it
When I'm not
working,
fighting
Siddharth?
poverty, I'm fighting fires as the assistant
Thank you.
captain of a volunteer fire company.
They're not able to
Now,
see. We're able
in our
to
town, where the
see,
volunteers supplement a highly skilled
Sorry,
close
please.
the power.
Back in New York, I am the head of development for a nonprofit called Robin Hood. When I'm not fighting poverty, I'm fighting fires as the assistant captain of a volunteer fire company. Now, in our town, where the volunteers supplement a highly skilled career staff, you have to get to the fire scene pretty early to get in on any action. I remember my first fire. I was the second volunteer on the scene, so there was a pretty good chance I was going to get in. But still, it was a real foot race against the other volunteers to get to the captain in charge to find out what our assignments would be. When I found the captain, he was having a very engaging conversation with the homeowner, who was surely having one of the worst days of her life. Here it was, the middle of the night. She was standing outside in the pouring rain, under an umbrella, in her pajamas, barefoot, while her house was in flames. The other volunteer who had arrived just before me, let's call him Lex Luthor, got to the captain first and was asked to go inside and save the homeowner's dog. The dog! Oh, I was stunned with jealousy. Here was some lawyer or money manager who for the rest of his life gets to tell people that he went into a burning building to save a living creature. Just because he beat me by 5 seconds. Well, I was next. The captain waved me over. Said, Bezos, I need you to go into the house. I need you to go upstairs, past the fire, and I need you to get this woman a pair of shoes. I swear. So, not exactly what I was hoping for, but off I went. Up the stairs, down the hall, past the real firefighters who were pretty much done putting out the fire at this point, into the master bedroom to get a pair of shoes. Now, I know what you're thinking, but I'm no hero. I carried my payload back downstairs where I met my nemesis and the precious dog by the front door. We took our treasures outside to the homeowner where, not surprisingly, his received much more attention than did mine. A few weeks later, the department received a letter from the homeowner thanking us for the valiant effort displayed in saving her home. The act of kindness she noted above all others, someone had even gotten her a pair of shoes. You know, in both my vocation at Robin Hood and my avocation as a volunteer firefighter, I am witness to acts of generosity and kindness on a monumental scale. But I'm also witness to acts of grace and courage on an individual basis. And you know what I've learned? They all matter. So as I look around this room at people who either have achieved or are on their way to achieving remarkable levels of success, I would offer this reminder. Don't wait. Don't wait until you make your first million to make a difference in somebody's life. If you have something to give it now. Serve food at a soup kitchen, clean up a neighborhood park, be a mentor. Not every day is going to offer us a chance to save somebody's life, but every day offers us an opportunity to affect one. So get in the game. Save the shoes. Thank you. Come back. Thank you.
Learning how to effectively share your best ideas creates opportunities for both you and your
So Siddharth, am I back?
Yeah, you can see your screen. Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I think this is where my first message to each one of us is that I think this is the moment for all of us to give it back, to actually make difference to somebody's life, even if it's a small one or a big one. Society is undergoing a huge stress. They all need us, and people in healthcare can actually make huge difference. I know a lot of fatigue, a lot of tiredness. Sometimes you don't really get appreciation from patients and their families. But I think we have to rise above all this and make a big difference to the society today. This is our chance. I think this is my first message. The second message that I have for each one of you is that this fight is actually long and we still don't know when it's going to end. And everybody is talking about wave 3. So we don't know when will that happen. Let's hope it doesn't happen. But even if it happens, it's going to be even tougher. That's what everybody is talking about. So the second message that I have for everybody is that in between, we need to learn to relax and find happiness in this adversity, because this is just not going to go away. We have to learn to live with it and be happy whenever possible. I think this is where I actually came across, this is somebody shared with me on WhatsApp a few weeks back, and I shared with my own team as well. It's about a great Turkish poet. When he asked his friend to actually put a picture of happiness. And I'll show you that picture which is there. So he drew a picture of a whole family cramped up on a broken bed under a leaky roof in a shabby room, but still with a smile on each member's face. And it goes without saying that this painting actually became very famous. And the message here is very simple, that happiness is not absence of sufferings, but acceptance of sufferings. See good around you even in trying situations. Stop worrying about things which are beyond your control and stay happy. And I think we are in a similar situation today where we find ourselves in where there are a lot of things which are beyond our control. So we need to learn to be happy. And this is the painting that became very famous. I'm sure you can see this, where each member of the family is smiling, a bed is broken, and still there is some kind of bliss that you can see in this painting. And the small little cat on the bed, a few birds, and the dog also sleeping on the bed as well. So I think the second message that I have is that I know it's been very tough for a very long time. We just need to learn to relax in these moments and find our moments of happiness in this adversity. So I actually came across a very interesting video on India Today TV recently, where doctors, and of course all of us have seen that, but I thought I'll share this video with you. It's a Punjabi song which really makes the moments pretty light. And let me play that video for all of us.
We have to share the screen. It's not come up on the screen yet.
So I think I've dropped off, right? Can you hear me, Siddharth?
We can hear you, but not the video. We couldn't hear the video.
Now it's off, right? So I think I'm pretty much done with the first module. We can now go to the next one, where probably is a little more interactive. So which is the part 2 of my conversation, Siddharth, which is related to the challenges that we faced in the company. What are the initiatives that we have taken? What are the lessons I have personally learned out of all this? So I have a picture which actually shows that what really happened. We had a nice Apple Card in March 2020, and suddenly it just gets upset. And it's been a journey for a year and a half. So I'm happy to share some of my experiences. You can ask me questions. And I know that some questions have been thrown at you as well. So I'm happy to get into a Q&A format if that works for you.
I think why don't you maybe share some of the lessons that has really come up over the last year or so. I kind of think they also address some of the questions coming up, and maybe we take up some of the questions that are now flashing on the screen right thereafter.
Right. Okay. So let me go back last year in the month of March, April. The first situation that we faced was a very sharp fall in our patient volumes. And it was such a free fall, we actually didn't know. And the first worry that we had was, do we have enough cash to actually run the business? Because it's a business which has very high fixed cost in the P&L. And I think that's true for even hospitals also. While there were not too many number of cases of COVID in general, but there was a lot of panic around. There were a lot of administrative hassles of making the machinery run, samples move. So if I were to look at what are the things that we had to do that time, and there are 4 or 5 key stakeholders in any business. The first biggest stakeholder is actually of a group of employees, right? The entire employee group is one stakeholder. The second group is investors or shareholders. And third group is your customers, patients, and I would include even vendors also in that, because that's also important constituents of any business. The fourth one, I would actually say society. Society, where I would put the government, public at large, patients, and everybody as one group. I think this is one moment I found myself in where I have to balance all 4 of them at the same time. Because normally when you run your business on a regular basis, you are focused on one thing at a time. But we were forced into a situation where we had to balance everything. I think the main focus went on to interface with the government, regulator, or towards patient and employees. And on employee side, the major issue was the anxiety. The anxiety of where you yourself are very anxious about catching infection, and anxiety of the family members because they were also very anxious of if if all of us are coming to work, we can catch infection, we can pass it on to our family members as well. So the few things that we did was, they were related to actually 5 different areas if I were to club that in clusters. The first one was health. I think that was most important aspect for managing these COVID times. So we made sure that we actually take care of the regular testing. We made sure that they are actually we take their term insurance for all of them. We made sure that the workplace is designed in such a way that all possible precautions of their safety, etc., are taken. We made sure that we took certain sort of a transportation from home to office, because public transport that time was not operating. Even now also, we made sure that we have some kind of private transport arranged for them. So I think the broad head, I would call it, health as one big area. The second big area was the financial security. While we are in healthcare, so it was not a bigger worry. But I think during the first phase of COVID, which is wave 1, there was always a mental sort of a thing as to, we are all operating from home, business is badly down, what's going to happen? And we were getting all kinds of news flow coming in from other sectors that there are job losses, migrant laborers going back to their hometown. So there was a bit of a panic about whether my job is secure. So I think that's the second area we took care of, which was providing financial security. And I think that was never an issue. The third area was emotional stability. I think personally, I would have spoken to at least 2,000 of my employees, at least 1/3 of the force in the last few months, directly through these Zoom calls. So we made all senior management members were actually accessible to all of them, though we were not traveling, but we were just one phone call away. And the way we are chatting on now, and we were reaching out to every one of them. And finally, there was a recognition and reward structure for people who had contributed to this whole workload that we were faced with. And of course, as you all know, that this on the business side, actually it was especially in wave 2, was a huge mismatch between demand and supply. Demand actually had gone up at least 10 to 15 times, and supply side was under so much of constraint. In wave 2, we had a lot of our own staff members getting impacted. They had COVID. So we actually had a situation where, if I may use the phrase, like candle started burning at both the ends, where the demand actually multiplied many-fold in a very short period of time. And it just did not give us any time to prepare for augmenting our supply. While wave 1, we still had a little bit of time for 8-9 months, we could plan things. But wave 2 actually just came like a ton of bricks. And it caught all of us by surprise, and then you know what really happened after that. It's been a quite challenging time for all of us, especially last 2 months have been so tough. But I also feel at some point in time, I feel happy that at least in whatever small way we could help our patients and made our contribution wherever possible. So I think overall there is a sense of sort of a, I know it's a difficult time, but we are fairly motivated as an organization, and I see a lot of energy today in the company to even take on wave 3 as well if it happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen. But I find what has really touched me in the last 13-14 months, and I have told this many times to my home collection person, head. Actually, I used to hesitate to call him because he was under tremendous amount of pressure. But I think when I talk to him, the vibrancy in his voice used to actually give me the energy rather than other way around. So, and I felt that these people who are working at the front line have so much of energy. I think amazing things which I have seen in the last, especially last 2 months. hats off to all of them. And I'm sure this has happened with every organization in healthcare. And I personally salute each one of you, whosoever is on this call, on this talk. And you guys have done a fabulous job. And country is proud of you, industry is proud of you. Keep doing this great work. And let's not let anyone down. It's our moment to contribute and make difference to somebody's life.
Great. Thanks, Om. I'm just going to take up, there are at least 15, 20 questions. I'll do my best to, club some of the themes together. The first question that has come in is really around the quality and the improvement of diagnostic services in rural India. While the private sector and there is abundance of quality, trustable diagnostic health services in the urban areas, what, in your opinion, are some of the challenges in the rural areas, and what do you think in the next 5 years the roadmap should be for both public sector, private sector, and public-private partnerships to really offer quality diagnostic services in the rural parts of the country?
I think the first biggest challenge is that diagnostic is a very fragmented space, and it's not deeply penetrated yet, even in smaller towns as well. If you look at the history of our journey of this space, it's the largest change only have come up in the last 15 to 20 years. A lot of this entire effort has gone into bigger markets, like I would actually use the term metros or mini metros. I know we are using the term rural areas, but it's not even there in tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 towns. So that's one challenge that I see. That it's work in process. It will definitely go down someday. Penetration levels are not that high. And what is defining this penetration? I think the diagnostic finally is a demand created by what is written on a prescription. And if doctor's prescription has two things, one is it has medicine, and second, it has diagnostics. And I'm not very sure whether in rural areas, other than some very basic tests, they are prescribed. So therefore, penetration levels actually remain very low in rural areas. The second challenge is of economics. Scale is very low. Affordability is a challenge. So at those price points, it's actually very difficult to have a viable proposition for a private player. And because you have to provide quality services, that we can't compromise on that. Scale is very low. Affordability is a challenge. And on top of that, in fact, manpower availability is a much bigger challenge in rural areas than in urban areas. And one has seen that doctors' availability is a bigger challenge. So I think though there is a demand, but on supply side, there are a few challenges which make this proposition a bit unviable. Now, I think your second part of the question is that what needs to be done? We just can't leave it there, right? To my mind, I think there are two things that need to be done. One is to look at some kind of point of care innovation where we can actually do the tests on the spot rather than making the sample travel to a central place. Because setting up a lab, you won't have a scale in that village or rural areas to really make it viable. So figure a way out where we can do some kind of point of care testing there. Second is, I think partnership with the government actually could be a big area of focus going forward. And my sense is the profile of diseases in rural areas is more in communicable side than in non-communicable. It may be a non-communicable as well, but I think right now the bigger issue could be more on communicable side. And I think private sector definitely can work with the public or public-private partnership, which can probably address this area. And I'm very sure in post-COVID era, we will definitely have some models emerging which will address the rural markets.
One of the things that has happened during this pandemic is the issues of building trust. You have touched upon the subject of anxiety among the citizens who are seeking healthcare services. This is an unknown virus. There have been reports of people being anxious about getting their reports on time. There have been, sporadic reports of violence against healthcare professionals. What do you think are some of the steps, both as industry and government, we need to take to be able to reinforce, to be able to first be able to protect our healthcare workers, and second, really reinforce what the boundary lines for for the healthcare sector really looks like, and the way we enrich the patient, provider interactions?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and and I think all of us in the industry have been grappling with this particular issue. And unfortunately, one challenge healthcare faces is that there's no guarantee of an outcome. So patient, when he or she comes to a healthcare institution or facility, obviously you're looking for outcome which is in your favor. Now that is something healthcare cannot guarantee. It's not like taking a car to a garage where whatever you can pay and still get it repaired. But here that is a challenge. And the second challenge is that on a daily basis, you are sort of curing a lot of patients, making difference to somebody's life, but there may be one case out of 100 actually gets a huge share of noise and voice in all over, that it tends to undo a lot of good stuff that has happened. My personal view is that I think this is that moment where that perception also can be changed. In these times, I think a lot of people are appreciating the kind of effort which healthcare industry has put in to fight this pandemic. I think we need to make sure that there are a lot of credible voices we get, and especially non-healthcare credible voices come forward and highlight the contribution made by healthcare industry, which I know it's happening in bits and pieces, but if we have a structured sort of a communication program and highlight achievements. And I know that some media channels have taken upon themselves to highlight the contribution made by healthcare industry in these times. I think that is something which will help. And I would even request some of the industry bodies to take up this in an aggressive manner and as we go forward.
Talking a little bit about the fragmentation of the industry as a whole. Quality in the sector, there are pockets of world-class quality and pockets of excellence, surrounded by really shades which are not, quality, are not accredited, variable quality standards. As you pointed, as you rightly pointed out, that an incident really has a ramification, and in the entire sector gets painted with one broad brushstroke. How can the overall quality and the reliability of the diagnostic sector really improve? And how can all the providers come under hopefully common quality standards?
Yeah, it's interesting sort of a question. I think one of the challenges that one faces in industry structure like us is where there's one important variable called scale. At any point in time, you are actually trying to balance three corners of the triangle. So one is quality, which is very, very important corner. The second corner is affordability, because India, any industry that you pick, you will find that we are a very price sensitive country. Just one more. So we are extremely price sensitive country, and we are also not a homogeneous sort of a set of people. And there are premium category customers, discount and mid price point, that applies to all industries. And third challenge that we fight is of accessibility, because as you asked, this question is that you have a good quality healthcare, but it's all lopsided towards urban areas. And you go 60, 70, 80 kilometers out of town, you suddenly find there's no healthcare. So to my mind, I think there are a lot of inefficiencies that exist in the industry structure. And I've always said that one solution to this is basically if you have a scale, and scale actually can help you achieve all the three. And that is one variable which is in our favor. India being such a large country with 1.3 billion people can easily give you that scale. The moment you put your organization, go on this path of achieving scale, it will create enough sort of funds for you to actually achieve all the three together. You can actually get all the best instruments. You can make it affordable because scale is on your side, and you can also make it accessible. And as we have seen this time on RT-PCR pricing as well, we found that pressure actually was felt more by the smaller set of players than the larger chains. And reason basically being the scale. I think that is something which we need to leverage upon. And that's where the balance will actually come in the industry in general.
Great. There's a variety of other questions, but I'm just going to pick really the one around, let's kind of take a look at the next 6 months to a year. Given where the pandemic is, wave 2 is hopefully waning down to some extent. What are some of the key lessons that we can take from wave 1 and wave 2? And should there be a wave 3, how can we be better prepared? And how can diagnostic industry in particular really give us advanced surveillance about whether the what, when, and where of wave 3, could the diagnostic sector be giving us the early warnings this time?
I think diagnostics, to my mind, is a lead indicator as to what's happening. If you pick up whether wave 3 is coming or not, it actually will get picked up in the positivity rate. I think companies in diagnostic space probably will have the ability to pick it up a little early, that yes, it's now started picking up a bit. While the numbers are being reported, but diagnostics players, wherever they are strong, at least in those pockets, they will have some idea as to what's happening. I think the second thing we need to prepare is that COVID is not the only reason for our problems, right? There are huge non-COVID related issues also. In the last 1.5 years, those issues have taken a backseat. My message to all the players in healthcare would be that it's not about this or that. It's actually about both. And that would essentially means is that we need to make sure that focus from the top of the organization is given to both sides. We've actually started doing that last year itself. So we have COVID task force. We also have a non-COVID task force. We have people engaged on COVID side of business. We also have time spent on non-COVID side of business as well. So my message to all people in healthcare would be that please don't ignore non-COVID side of business. So make sure that our patient needs are met on both the fronts.
And what are some of your recommendations and suggestions for a body like NatHealth in the way we can help shape industry and our citizens and make them more prepared for wave 3?
So one suggestion that I have is to actually work with the government bodies to see that how, I go back to the point that I was trying to make is of scale. Our entire structure in the country is that health being a state subject, within the state also districts have a lot of sort of autonomy to do what they want to do. I think at one level it's a good thing to happen, but I have a feeling that many of these things are contextual, and some of these structures were put in place many decades back, when the information flow was not on real-time basis, technology was not that advanced. I think industry bodies need to work with policymakers and see that how some of these structures need to change with times, and they actually meet today's requirement. What we have today may have met yesterday's requirement, but not today's requirement. And not only I would say today's requirement, we actually have to reimagine what the future is going to look like and help policymakers to come back with the structures which meet tomorrow's requirement. And to my mind, tomorrow's requirement actually is, while we say many times about this whole quality, affordability, and accessibility, it may be a good idea to see if we can create a think tank to really put together some of the lessons that we've learned out of this and reimagine the future while we are fighting pandemic right now. But if we can have white papers, let's say for 10, 15, 20, 30 years forward, and see what a country like India needs to do with the help of both private and public sector talent coming together and putting a white paper on that.
Thank you so much, Om. Your views are very, very appreciated. I would like to thank over 150 viewers who have logged in, listened to this interaction. For those healthcare frontline workers, our colleagues in the industry who couldn't join in today, this entire session would be put up live. It has been recorded. A lot of the questions and answers would be transcribed and put out in a blog format. And you will be able to see this blog along with the video on NatHealth social handles in Facebook, Twitter, as well as on our website. We are again going to come back next Thursday, which is the 10th of June at 5 p.m., where we have a session with Ms. Isabel Neto Alvarez, who is the expert at Siemens Healthineers Global Innovation Team. And she'll be our next eminent speaker in this NatHealth Leadership Outreach Series. I would like to thank Dr. Om Manchanda for his valuable thoughts today. I'd like to thank all my colleagues in the NatHealth Secretariat, as well as the team from Health Business Insights for organizing this session today. And again, my special thanks to all my colleagues who dialed in and listened to this discussion. With those words, have a pleasant evening and a wonderful week ahead. Thank you. Thank you, Om, again.
Thank you, Siddharth.